What if some of the most flavorful, nutrient-packed vegetables vanished from our gardens? Centuries ago, ancient Chinese farmers grew 15 unique crops that were full of taste and goodness. Over time, these vegetables slowly disappeared from our kitchens. Now it's the perfect moment to bring them back and enjoy the healthy traditions they once offered. This once-loved green from ancient China has quietly disappeared from modern farms. Unlike delicate vegetables that need careful tending, Chinese mallow was the perfect low-maintenance crop. It thrived in poor soil, survived drought, and grew with almost no help from farmers. Once planted, it returned year after year, creating a steady supply of fresh leaves. For centuries, it was the kind of plant that made life easier for families who had little to spare. The taste was what made Chinese mallow stand out. Its young leaves were soft, earthy, and slightly nutty, something between spinach and okra. When cooked, they turned silky and added a gentle thickness to soups and stews. Many families used them as a natural thickener long before flour or starch became common. Healers also valued the plant for its cooling effects and believed it could soothe inflammation during hot seasons. What made Chinese mallow truly valuable was its reliability. During dry spells or poor harvests, it kept growing when other crops failed. Ancient records describe it as a lifesaver for rural families who depended on wild greens to survive lean times. For this reason, it became known as the people's vegetable, a humble but vital part of daily life. Cooks found endless ways to use it. They stir-fried it with garlic, simmered it into broths, or mixed it with grains. It fit easily into any meal and added both flavor and strength. Somewhere along the way, this sturdy green was forgotten. As modern farming focused on high-yield crops, Chinese mallow slipped from the fields. Meanwhile, another forgotten plant was once a star of ancient Chinese farms and riverbanks. Farmers welcomed its first shoots in spring after months of scarcity. Knotweed greens grew easily in damp soil and thrived without care, offering a dependable source of food when other crops were still asleep. It had the persistence of a weed and the taste of something worth celebrating, quietly feeding entire villages year after year. What made knotweed greens special? Every part of the plant could be used. The tender stems were steamed or stir-fried like asparagus, the young leaves added a tangy note to soups, and the shoots were pickled to brighten winter meals. Healers used the roots to cool the body and restore balance after illness. The taste was crisp and pleasantly sour, somewhere between sorrel and rhubarb, bringing life to simple dishes and energy to tired bodies. The plant itself grew tall and graceful with red-tinged stalks and clusters of small flowers. It flourished beside rice paddies and streams, returning each year with no help from farmers. Its generous nature made it a symbol of renewal and endurance. By the late Ming Dynasty, changes in farming and trade pushed this reliable food aside. New vegetables and market crops replaced it in kitchens, and knotweed greens slowly vanished from tables. While knotweed spread freely across the land, another ancient favorite had a more refined place in the gardens of old China. Why did one of the most dependable plants in early farming disappear from our plates? Unlike the bold knotweed greens, lamb's quarters begins with a quiet story. It was once one of the most common greens on ancient Chinese farms, appearing uninvited among crops but always welcomed. Farmers never had to plant it. The seeds slept in the soil through winter and sprouted on their own when the weather warmed. Its silver-green leaves glowed in the sun, feeding families at a time when every fresh bite mattered. Growing lamb's quarters is effortless. It thrives in dry fields, rocky soil, and even along the paths where nothing else survives. Once it appears, it keeps returning year after year. If plants could earn titles, lamb's quarters would be called the survivor. It was a dependable food source for farmers who had little time to spare for delicate vegetables. Its nutritional value was extraordinary. The leaves hold more iron and protein than spinach and are rich in vitamins A and C. In early spring, when food stores ran low, this humble green kept people strong. Ancient cooks steamed the tender shoots, boiled the older leaves like spinach, and ground the tiny seeds into flour. It was a complete food from root to seed, filling tables with nourishment and flavor. Healers valued it for cleansing the body and easing stomach troubles. It was simple, strong, and good for nearly everything. By the late Qing dynasty, modern crops and market gardening pushed it aside, and it slowly vanished from daily life. Is it a weed? Is it a vegetable? Ancient Chinese farmers might have asked the same question. Shepherd's purse has long puzzled and impressed those who knew its power. This modest plant grew in rice paddies, paths, and field edges, thriving without care. It was the vegetable world's version of a hidden gem, showing up where no one expected food to grow, yet becoming a trusted companion to generations of farmers. When cooked properly, shepherd's purse revealed a delicate, peppery flavor, something between mustard greens and spinach. This made it a prized ingredient in humble country kitchens and fine spring dishes alike. It was especially valued during early spring, when food stores were running low and fresh greens were rare. Records from old herbal texts describe it as a food for strength and balance, often cooked in soups or dumplings during festival seasons. Two kinds of shepherd's purse were commonly gathered. Wild varieties grew freely in fields, while cultivated ones were grown near homes for their larger, tender leaves. The heart-shaped seed pods, shaped like tiny purses, gave the plant its name and made it easy to recognize. Beneath its plain appearance hid a plant treasured for both taste and medicine. Spring and early summer were its best seasons. The leaves stayed tender even in cool weather, and the plant could be dried and stored for later. In times of scarcity, it became an essential source of vitamins and flavor, helping families endure the months before harvest. Modern agriculture moved away from shepherd's purse as polished vegetables took over the markets. Speaking of unusual looks, ancient Chinese farmers had another leafy favorite that modern people might overlook. If someone served a bowl of jagged, spiny greens today, most would think it was a weed. But centuries ago, thistle was a prized vegetable gathered every spring and loved for its healing strength. What looks wild and unruly to us was once considered a reliable gift from the soil. Fresh from the field, the leaves are coarse and bitter, hardly appealing at first taste. But ancient cooks knew its secret. Thistle had to be blanched or soaked before eating, which softened the texture and mellowed the flavor. It was the test of patience and skill, turning a rough plant into something tender and nourishing. Once prepared, the leaves revealed a mild, slightly nutty flavor similar to dandelion greens. Ancient Chinese recipes from the Han and Tang dynasties describe sow thistle being cooked with sesame oil, ginger, and fermented sauces. Healers also praised it in old herbal records, like the Compendium of Materia Medica, noting that it cleared heat and soothed the stomach. It was the everyday medicine of the fields, eaten by both peasants and monks. The plant itself was easy to find, with its saw-toothed leaves and pale yellow flowers swaying along roadsides. It grew without care, returning each spring like an old friend. Modern agriculture pushed sow thistle aside for softer, sweeter greens. Yet this ancient plant still thrives in quiet corners, growing strong without help, waiting to remind us how much goodness can hide in a humble weed. Unlike the demanding crops that needed perfect soil and constant watering, long-stamen wild onion never asked for special care. It grew freely across ancient Chinese farmlands, mountain slopes, and village paths. This hardy plant, with its slender green leaves and pale purple flowers, appeared wherever the earth had a bit of space. Farmers didn't need to plant it. They couldn't have stopped it even if they tried. It was the quiet survivor of the vegetable world, always showing up and always useful. Long-stamen wild onion was like that uninvited guest who turns out to be the most helpful person at the gathering. It thrived in every kind of soil and spread quickly, producing fresh greens through much of the year. Each bulb multiplied underground, ensuring there was always more to harvest. Ancient cooks and herbalists learned to see its worth. The tender shoots added a bright, onion-like flavor to stews and dumplings, while the bulbs were dried and stored for later. Instead of clearing it away as a weed, families gathered it as a dependable, free crop. The leaves were rich in nutrients, providing fresh greens during the cool seasons when little else grew. Traditional healers valued it for warming the body, clearing phlegm, and easing cold symptoms. In temple gardens and farmhouse plots alike, it became a quiet staple. Old herbal texts mention it as a plant that grows from stone and gives strength to bone. That reputation kept it in use for centuries. Modern agriculture eventually ignored long-stamen wild onion, favoring uniform onions and chives. No one expects to eat flowers, especially ones that bloom beside ponds and ditches. Daylily flower buds don't sound like much of a meal, do they? Sorry, I can't come to dinner tonight. I'm cooking flowers. Yet for ancient Chinese farmers, this plant was a kitchen staple and a symbol of comfort. The name may sound poetic, but its roots run deep in daily life. Herbalists once claimed that the daylily could ease sorrow and bring calm, calling it the forget-worry herb. That claim may be a little poetic, but farmers discovered something even better. Daylily buds were delicious and surprisingly filling, often mistaken for decorative lilies. The edible daylily is a practical plant with a sturdy stem, long leaves, and thick clusters of buds that open into bright orange blooms. Before flowering, those buds are harvested, dried, and cooked. The taste is delicate and earthy, a mix of green beans and mild asparagus, with a faint sweetness that pairs beautifully with meat or tofu. What made daylilies remarkable was their usefulness all year. The buds could be eaten fresh in summer or dried for storage through winter. Ancient Chinese cooks used them in soups, hot pots, and festive dishes, adding flavor and texture when few fresh vegetables were available. Temple and village recipes recorded them as both food and medicine for calming the spirit and improving sleep. The decline came quietly with modern farming. Sadly, processed vegetables and decorative gardens replaced wild gathering. Oddly enough, Chinese toon is neither a herb nor a tree nor a vegetable in the usual sense. It's the ancient plant world's version of something that can't decide what it wants to be and still ends up excelling at all of them. Farmers called it the tree vegetable, and for good reason. The actual origin of Chinese toon is East Asia, where it has been cultivated for thousands of years. It likely spread between regions through early trade routes across China. Ancient farmers appreciated this versatile plant that provided flavorful greens every spring. Its reddish shoots and strong aroma made it instantly recognizable and deeply tied to traditional cuisine. What made it special? Chinese toon is perennial, meaning once planted, it returns every year without replanting. Each tree-like plant grows new shoots each spring, which can be trimmed and eaten while still tender. Over time, the tree thickens and produces even more sprouts, making it a long-lasting source of food. One tree could feed a family for decades with careful care. Chinese toon served a practical purpose in daily life. The tender buds were mixed with eggs, noodles, or tofu, creating dishes with a deep, savory flavor unlike any other vegetable. Its strong fragrance symbolized the start of spring, and the shoots were dried and preserved for later use. The plant also appeared in ancient medicine, believed to strengthen the liver and improve circulation. If vegetables could have a personality, Chinese toon would be the poet of the garden, aromatic, resilient, and full of character. Ancient farmers treasured it, but modern agriculture preferred faster, milder greens. Meanwhile, another remarkable plant was waiting to bloom in the wetlands of old China. Unlike the Chinese toon that farmers carefully tended, lotus root simply grew where it pleased. It appeared naturally in ponds, lakes, and slow rivers across ancient China, and people were wise enough to harvest it instead of ignoring it. Lotus root was the wild beauty of the water world, elegant and practical at the same time. Lotus root is like the graceful guest who arrives late to dinner and still steals the show. It was both ornamental and essential, offering beauty above the water and food below. The tall pink flowers charmed poets and monks, while the thick roots beneath fed entire families. Each long, crisp root formed a chain under the mud, making it a renewable source of food year after year. Modern nutrition studies show that ancient farmers were right to prize it. Lotus root is rich in iron, vitamin C, and fiber, and it stays firm and crunchy even after cooking. In ancient times, it was eaten raw in salads, steamed in soups, or stir-fried with vinegar and sesame oil. If vegetables had slogans, lotus roots might have been too pretty to ignore, too healthy to waste. Archaeological findings from ancient Chinese tombs have revealed lotus seeds preserved for centuries, showing how important this plant was as both food and symbol. The lotus stood for purity and endurance, while its roots kept people alive during floods and droughts. Modern farming pushed lotus root to the side as wetlands were drained for other crops. We essentially evicted a superfood that thrived without complaint. While lotus root faded from the fields, another aquatic plant was waiting quietly below the surface for its chance to return. Why did a plant, shaped like a bat's head and named after a weapon, disappear from our tables? Unlike lotus root, which quietly nourished families, the water caltrop was a true showstopper. Its strange, black shell and horned shape made it look more like something from a myth than a meal. Yet for centuries, this odd aquatic nut was one of the most beloved foods across ancient China. Farmers grew it in shallow lakes and flooded fields, harvesting the hard fruits that floated to the surface in late autumn. Ancient records describe it as a festival food, boiled and eaten during harvest celebrations. Its crisp, white flesh tasted faintly sweet, something between chestnut and potato, and its unusual shape made it a popular offering to the gods during seasonal rituals. The flavor was rich, but its versatility made it essential. Families roasted it over open fires, boiled it into soups, and ground it into flour. The nuts stored well for months, providing valuable nutrition during winter. Monks and travelers carried them as light, filling food for long journeys. In some regions, children treated them like natural toys, carving the shells into charms and ornaments. What made the water caltrop truly special were its medicinal uses. Herbalists praised it for cooling the body, improving digestion, and restoring energy after illness. Old medical texts listed it among the gifts of autumn water, alongside lotus seeds and water chestnuts. Modern agriculture forgot the water caltrop as new crops took over the wetlands. Ancient Chinese farmers might laugh at us today. You stopped growing a plant shaped like a dragon's head that tastes like chestnut and stores for months? Truly, progress can be confusing. While the caltrop sank beneath the mud, another ancient aquatic treasure was quietly waiting for rediscovery. No, it has nothing to do with mythical monsters. The Gorgon nut's name sounds fierce enough to scare off modern eaters, but ancient Chinese farmers knew it as a graceful and dependable water plant. While the water caltrop captured attention with its dramatic shape, the Gorgon nut quietly fed families across generations. The name comes from the Latinized word for Euryale ferox, a water lily that produces round, spiny seeds. These seeds, when dried and peeled, turn into smooth white kernels that were once a staple food. They grow in calm lakes and ponds, protected by floating leaves and thorny stems. Harvesting them required patience and thick skin, literally, because the plants were covered in tiny spines. Farmers valued Gorgon nuts for their flavor and staying power. The seeds could be roasted, boiled into soups, or ground into flour. They had a nutty, slightly sweet taste, something between popcorn and chestnut. Ancient medical texts praised them for strengthening the body, calming the nerves, and improving energy. They were a favorite in temple diets and often offered during festivals as symbols of purity and perseverance. Nutritionally, the Gorgon nut deserves a modern comeback. It's rich in protein, fiber, and minerals like calcium and potassium. In ancient times, it served as both food and tonic, helping people through long winters when fresh vegetables were scarce. Modern farming moved away from labor-intensive aquatic crops, and the Gorgon nut was left behind. It's the only seed that could double as both a snack and a spiritual metaphor, proof that even the quietest foods once carried great meaning. Another bold-flavored ancient vegetable rejected for being too distinctive for modern tastes. Too intense for modern palates, that's the story of arrowhead tubers, a plant ancient Chinese cooks valued deeply, but later generations nearly forgot. Arrowhead grows in shallow water, with tall, arrow-shaped leaves and smooth, white tubers hidden in the mud. Every part of the plant offered something useful. The crisp, starchy tubers were eaten much like potatoes, though they appeared in Chinese kitchens long before potatoes ever reached Asia. Their taste is earthy, nutty, and slightly sweet, the kind of flavor that demands attention. Old recipes describe arrowhead tubers fried in sesame oil, simmered in stews, and roasted whole during winter festivals. Their rich starch content made them a staple during cold months, while the leaves were sometimes used in herbal remedies. Modern research shows they're full of fiber, potassium, and antioxidants. If roots could have a fan club, Arrowhead would have led it. Beyond their taste, arrowhead tubers served an important practical role. They stored well through winter and could grow in flooded fields, giving farmers a backup crop during drought or rice failures. Herbalists also brewed the dried tubers into teas for digestion and energy. In temple gardens, they symbolized balance between land and water. Modern agriculture replaced Arrowhead with easier, faster-growing staples, but in some rural areas, families still gather them for New Year feasts, remembering the flavor their ancestors relied on. Arrowhead is the stubborn, strong-willed ancestor of modern roots, still alive, still delicious, and still waiting to reclaim its place at the table. While Arrowhead thrived in muddy ponds, another ancient plant quietly grew in the same waters and somehow slipped from memory. It grows wild, it requires no care, and yet we've nearly forgotten it. While Arrowhead was known for its hardy tubers, water dropwort was treasured for its tender stems and leaves. Growing along riverbanks and irrigation ditches across ancient China, it was a dependable food for farming families. This strong, bright green plant thrived where other vegetables drowned. Its hollow stems and crisp texture made it both beautiful and practical, a kind of wild celery for the wetlands. Water dropwort is like that reliable friend who always shows up with exactly what you need, but never asks for credit. In early spring, when stored food was running low, farmers gathered its fresh shoots for soups and salads. The taste was clean and slightly peppery, like parsley mixed with celery. It was mild enough for children and flavorful enough for the pickiest elders. Ancient texts praised it for keeping the body cool and easing fevers during the hot season. The plant was also used in medicine to balance the blood and aid digestion. It became a staple ingredient in traditional dishes, especially during festivals celebrating the return of spring. The disappearance of water dropwort from modern diets is like forgetting to open a gift that's been waiting by the riverbank for centuries. It still grows freely in fields and streams, quietly offering flavor and health while the world looks elsewhere. This one is truly unusual. While many ancient crops were grown purely for food, taro had a double life. It was a kitchen staple and a cultural symbol, appearing in myths, rituals, and feasts across ancient China. The large heart-shaped leaves gave the plant a noble look, but the real treasure lay underground. The thick, starchy corms fed millions long before rice became widespread. Their creamy texture and nutty flavor made them a favorite ingredient in everything from soups to steamed cakes. Before sweet potatoes ever reached Asia, taro was already the root of comfort food. Young taro leaves could also be eaten when properly cooked, though they required care. Raw taro contains natural compounds that irritate the skin, so cooks soaked and boiled the leaves before use. The result was tender greens rich in calcium and vitamins, offering another layer of nourishment from the same plant. Growing taro was a muddy, messy business. Farmers worked barefoot in flooded fields, planting corms in rows that mirrored rice paddies. The work was hard, but the reward was worth it. Taro stored well and stayed edible through long winters. It even inspired poems and proverbs, celebrating resilience and patience. Modern agriculture replaced taro with faster-growing roots and refined grains. The world traded depth for convenience. Yet in rural villages, taro still finds its way to family tables, reminding us that true comfort often comes from the earth's oldest roots. While taro carried the weight of tradition, another humble root quietly grew in the same fields. Everyone knows modern yams and sweet potatoes, but ancient Chinese farmers also cultivated a finer, more delicate cousin, the Chinese yam. It's like discovering that your family's quietest relative secretly built half the village. Chinese yam might look plain, but it carried enormous value. The slender white tubers grow deep into the soil, and once harvested, they can be stored for months. In hard winters, that made the difference between hunger and survival. What set Chinese yam apart was its texture and sweetness. When cooked, it becomes silky and slightly sticky, with a mild flavor that fits both savory and sweet dishes. Traditional cooks stir-fried it with ginger or sliced it into herbal soups. Medicinal texts praised it for strengthening the lungs, aiding digestion, and restoring vitality, making it both food and healing tonic. Farmers valued it as a perennial crop that returned every year from leftover roots. It didn't need pampering, only patience. The more it was ignored, the stronger it grew. Over time, it became a quiet symbol of endurance in Chinese culture. Modern tastes shifted toward easier, bulkier vegetables, and Chinese yam faded from daily cooking. but its gentle sweetness and nourishing strength still live on in traditional recipes. From Chinese mallow to Chinese yam, these 15 forgotten vegetables show how much knowledge we've lost about food that once sustained the ancient Chinese people.